Twitter could be adding podcasts. The latest from Podnews.net with the Podcast Show, the new international festival for podcasting in London this May. Will we see a podcast player in Twitter? Alessandro Paluzzi has spotted a podcasts option in the latest Twitter code, and Jane Manchung Wong has also unearthed a podcasts tab. Nathan Gaithright has brainstormed some ideas about what he hopes Twitter is up to. Let's hope it's not just reruns of Twitter Spaces. In Australia, Spotify appears to be conducting a survey asking if people would be willing to pay for ad-free versions of Spotify shows, which is intriguing. The British Podcast Awards 2022 are now open to enter. If you've created at least 6 episodes of a podcast over the last year, you're probably eligible. iHeartMedia's Conal Byrne has made a number of predictions about podcasting for 2022, writing in Forbes. The entire internet, he says, will be converted to audio and distributed on demand. It's bold. Podcast Movement has announced Latif Nasser, Radiolab co-host, as a keynote speaker at Podcast Movement Evolutions. We'll link to the registration form today, and we will be there, and very much looking forward to it. Salt Audio has partnered with Jenkins the Valet, an NFT character, to produce a Web3 native interactive audio experience. It'll appear this summer, whatever it is. In podcast representation deals, the Fox Audio Network has signed a hosting and advertising deal with Megaphone. A number of the company's shows were with Triton Digital's Omni Studio. BuzzFeed Studios has signed with Acast to launch a podcast slate of 6 shows. BuzzFeed also has shows hosted with Anchor and iHeartRadio. Acast has signed Scott McGillifray, a prolific expert in real estate and TV star, for Season 3 of The Real Estate Rebel, and AdLarge has signed Going West, a top-ranked true crime podcast. Neon Hum has announced the participants and instructors for its 2nd annual boot camp for podcast editors. Would you like to raise $2 million? Insider has published a Supercast's pitch deck, which they used in their fundraise. Zurich-based Snipped has raised $700,000 in a pre-seed funding round. Libsyn has closed its acquisition of podcast ad reps, or as their statement to the SEC says, consummated the transaction. Ooh. And Podcast Gumbo's Paul Kondo has launched what he calls a crazy podcast pitch experiment, where he opens up his calendar for people to pitch his podcasts. I was a little stunned at how quickly the slots were filled, he told Podnews. And in People News, Greg Herman is the new managing editor of Apple Podcasts. He'll lead curation for Apple's editorial team covering the US and Canada. Based out of Culver City in California, he joins from Spotify and CBS Radio. And Sam Sanders is to leave NPR. He'd been hosting It's Been a Minute since 2017 and been with NPR since 2009. The show will continue. It also airs on 441 stations. And in podcast news, State of Ukraine has launched today from NPR. The show will release multiple episodes during the day from NPR journalists on the ground, as well as conversations with officials, experts and other newsmakers. Scoundrel, History's Forgotten Villains is new from the creators of Myths and Legends and Cast Media. It tells the stories of the rapscallions through time who are just a little more adept at hiding their evil from historians than others, and is hosted by Jason and Carissa Weiser. And Blast from My Past is officially launched today, featuring true stories of people whose lives were changed by discoveries about their family's past. Produced by Listen and My Heritage, it'll be launched in a family history conference. This podcast is brought to you by The Podcast Show, the new international festival for podcasting in London this May. This 2-day business event has speakers like the CEO of Wondery, Jen Sargent, and Steph Simon from Clubhouse, access to over 120 global brands and unmissable live shows. You can get 20% off day passes with the code PODNEWS at thepodcastshowlondon.com. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories in full and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.